feel like everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
100%. Why is this important? Why are we even going here? He's helped a lot of guys. He's also not had success with a lot of guys.
Come in with a purpose, and they're very intentional with what they do and how they do it.
From the majors to the sandlot, baseball and softball share space in one place. Welcome to the farm system.
Fellas, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. And the ladies, I got you coded. I thought I forgot. But we are going to jump right in. And again, today we got a special guest, my boy Josh. Why don't you go ahead and just give him a breakdown? I'm sure there's a whole bunch of people that follow both of us, but too, if somebody hasn't met you, why don't you go ahead and just give them an introduction of who you are?
Okay. My name is Josh Cathcart. Just south of Houston in Pearland, Texas. I've been coaching baseball for 20 years now. I've been on social media, I guess this is about 4 or 5, at a place called Hardball Academy. It's Hitting Done Right on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook.
Yep.
So I don't want to use the word specialized, but I work with younger players for the most part, 9 to 15. And then I have my longtime clients that are now in college or, whatever they're doing. But yeah, man, just I'm at a point now that I'm able to get out and travel the country and meet up with guys that I follow and kind of have like mindset when it comes to working with their players. And, gave y'all a call. I had an opportunity. Never been to Vegas before.
Yeah. Vegas.
Crappy weather.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I mean, the weather sucks right now.
We get rain. We get rain like 6 days a year, and here you are.
Yeah, here I am. And also with it 37 degrees or whatever it is. So the South Texas boy, not so much. But dude, I really, I've enjoyed kind of your journey with stuff, watching the stuff that you've put out. And so I'm happy to be here and excited to talk a little hitting, man.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, thanks for coming. And some of the things I think are big that you even just pointed out right there was, I think it's interesting what you've done too, where you kind of, your niche, right? Like, like you, again, even I've never heard a coach until you just said right now, like, yeah, generally I work from like 9 to 15, like, man, like that's, again, along with it, why don't you kind of open that up of like just knowing, because I talk about that quite a bit about not necessarily that it needs to be one thing or another, but when you know who you are, right, and you know what's what fills your cup and what that looks like for you, like what is that for you? Why has that been kind of where you've settled in?
I think the teaching aspect of it first. We were speaking earlier when I was observing that I was an elementary PE teacher.
Yeah,
that was my attached job to my high school coaching job.
Yeah,
and I've always enjoyed kids.
Yeah.
And that age and kind of getting that mold. We were speaking on it briefly where I don't want the best hitter to walk in the door. I want that kind of that clean slate that we can figure out from Jump Street, what they need.
Yeah.
And I want to make this game as enjoyable to as many as I can.
Yeah.
And it's so hard. It's gotten to the point that it's so competitive early
it is
that everybody is, I need, my 6-year-old needs a hitting coach.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little ridiculous,
Yeah.
but it's the way of the world.
Yeah.
And I just seem to resonate with that, my playing history. And it's one of those things, the quote unquote haters for me is he didn't play in the big leagues.
Yeah.
He didn't play big college baseball. You're right.
Yeah.
But I grew up around baseball. I've been studying the swing. I had to work really hard at hitting when I was playing.
Same.
And so I understand that grind and not being able to out athlete it.
Yeah.
I tell them that you actually have to have an understanding of process. You have to understand what you do well.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of the facility that I'm at. We don't have the high technology, the high end clients coming in. We are in a smaller area south of Houston. And so it is. It's more youth into high school, not getting, up in a major part of a metropolitan area where pros are coming to nicer facilities. And it's worked out. I get all the time from parents and coaches, you really work well with that age, getting the best out of them with something that's really, really difficult to do.
Yeah. No, and I think one of the things is you go back in is like how the in that same process, like, again, majority of your players are going to be younger, right? Obviously, as you go up through levels, there's less and less players. That's just, how it works, right? There's very few players that are playing at 40, right?
No doubt.
Right, or definitely at 60 or
Yes.
things like that, right? Where golf or something like that, a different sport, that's very different. And one of the things that you talked about quite a bit is when we had a session this morning, and I was like, hey, like I told Terry to reach out to him, like, hey, if he wants to come and shadow, like I'd love. We were trying to set up the first time, right?
Yep.
That if you could come and shadow, I think it's insightful for like again like how we train, why we train, trying to make some of these things like applicable, but some of the things as well, like we had talked through is that younger age group. Like you said, I even my nephew is 10 years old, and I don't ever push him to come and hit with me. I've only hit with him like a few times in his life, but he plays a lot of sports. And I never wanted to be the one that's like pushing him to play baseball. I'm like, yo, like when he has football games, I go to his football games. He has
Yep.
soccer games, I go to his soccer games. He has basketball games, I go to his basketball games. His baseball games, I go to his baseball games. And, also too, at some point, like he'll get, when he loves, like what made me train the way that I did was I loved baseball first. So I always remember that, right? That I wouldn't have trained like I did if I didn't love baseball first. So I always give him the opportunity to fall in love with baseball. And then if he wants to train, like, well, good. I'll be here as a
Absolutely.
resource for the rest of your life, but I'm never going to force you to come and, train with me or, force your family to come train with me or, any of that, as well.
That's kind of how it is. I have a 10-year-old daughter, and people all the time, oh, she's, she must be a softball player. But and I'm like, actually, that girl don't even pick up softball.
Yeah.
Like she won't even flinch at a softball.
Yeah.
She plays soccer and she rides horses.
Oh, okay.
And her passion
Yeah.
is the horses.
Yeah.
And how do we know this?
Cool.
It's because that's what she talks about when she gets home. She's not talking about going out soccer. She's talking about jumping horses.
Yeah.
And being able to let those kids find their own way,
For sure.
I think is super, super important. And I'm never going to, I guess, turn down the opportunity to help, but I do tell people often, this is too young. This isn't going to work because I can tell by their attitude when they're here in the cage or whatever, they're not.
Maybe they're not mature enough.
They're not ready for this.
Yeah. And again, you could always tell when an athlete is there because their parent wants them to be there, or like they're genuinely like really excited, obviously, to come and they want to play and they want
100%
want to learn and they
see it in their eyes.
We see that all the time. Yeah. And so we talk about that, constantly all the time, as well as again, even when we do evals and things like that, I think we do a pretty good job before they even come in of them knowing who we are. And also, again, this isn't necessarily like a normal, obviously, batting cage that you're just going to come into and hit. And, we're private and we have memberships and all these other things, but it's definitely, again, we have our own niches. Well, like, everybody has their own niches. And to be honest with you too, people think on the other end of that, it's not one way or another. We were talking about this earlier about business models.
Yep.
There's also a lot of different ways of what that looks like. Like, to be honest with you, there's more people that are younger than there is that are older
and
also,
high end,
or high end,
Yep.
and super serious, and all these other things, and are willing to commit money and time and effort to go and do particular ways, especially with what we recommend and what we require also too when they're training with us. And so I think people also have this niche that, for example, there's a lot of coaches that have way more clients than we do. And also too, like from a financial side, might even be making way more money than our entire business, right? But just because of what that works for, and I just want to like encourage from that same side that like it's not that you need to do one. There's not one that's more important than the other. If anything, like building baseball is not fun when you're not hitting.
No doubt. No
It's
doubt.
just not
Yeah, when
fun.
you're not having success, it's
Yeah.
not fun.
It's just not fun.
Yeah.
And so that's where it becomes on the same side of that is like before they ever even get to, an age where that maybe they do want to come to us, is I think the coach's responsibility there as well is to kind of take out those hindrances. And a lot of times, to be honest, a lot of those hindrances are adults, right? And the adults are that end up being the things that are hurdles. Maybe it's their parents, maybe it's their coach, maybe it's their, again, maybe it's the umpire, maybe it's all these things, right? Of like how we make, sports fun for kids when they're younger, where I just always remember that as like, I think we try to make them adults too quick and again, the only reason that we could take it serious was that like we loved baseball first.
Loved it. And that was the thing, is I never had to be asked to go practice. I didn't have to be asked to go, do my work for baseball. Now, other things were like pulling teeth.
Yeah.
But baseball, dude, give me a glove, give me a wall, give me and let's get after it.
For sure.
It's funny that you kind of bring that up. I'm doing another podcast on Wednesday with the softball organization,
Mhm.
and it's talking about, youth sports and how parents affect it,
Yeah.
both positively and negatively.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited about that. But I think you're right. I think that there's unrealistic expectations attached to spending money on something.
Yeah.
If I'm going to pay for this lesson with this person,
Yeah.
then magically my kid is going to be this.
Yeah.
And it's like, nah, man, that's not quite how this works.
Yeah.
Not in life in general, but especially when you're talking hitting.
Yeah.
So
and it's also too one thing that Chris Colabello always talks about is he talks about like hitting more as a discipline, right? Like it's for example, think of it like this as well. This is what it comes with like skills is there's players that happens all the time. Like let's say I haven't played basketball. I just started playing basketball last year, right? There's people that start playing basketball last year and they're really good, right? Or again, baseball. There's kids that haven't played baseball majority of their life, and all of a sudden they start playing baseball, and that kid might be really good. And obviously it's skilled in the same way where there's particular skills that hitting is definitely one that it takes time of learning. But I also think on the same side of that is sometimes we forget with that as well is that we're all gifted in different ways, right? Like genetically, you genetically, me genetically, everybody genetically can have these different places, but also too, like as we train, we're going to also, it's actually interesting from the science side is how we train and how our body starts to adapt. Put in certain situations, your body actually, you can activate different parts of like your genetic code. So you could have something inside of you that once you start training a certain way, all of a sudden
it lights it up.
Yeah, lights these things up, and your body adapts crazy and all these things. And it's like you would never know that was you'd never know that was inside of you until you actually started.
It's that proverbial light bulb moment.
Yeah,
like where people do the aha. Like that's it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, and so as we were talking through these, obviously, we started talking through, and there was a lot of things that you're bringing up that you were interested in, and I was like, hey, I bet you that there's a lot of other people that would also be interested in
For
a
sure.
lot of the same questions and the things that you had as well. So we just decided, and also too, anytime we could have somebody in house and we can do an in-person podcast, like I love doing.
Amen. Glad I could help you out, Joey. Just kidding, man.
Yeah, for sure. No, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I love when we have people in house, so that we can jump on a podcast and talk through those things. But yeah, I know that you had a couple things, specific things that
I do. I'm going to be that guy because
the phone. All good.
Gatekeeper over there. I had to ask some questions.
No, absolutely.
And with all of these, I am very process based.
Yeah.
And so coming from the younger players that y'all may get, y'all were talking about having some guys that work with younger, up to those high end.
Yeah.
And the first one just off the top was, how do you decide, like, do people come to you? Do they send video? Like, how do you decide to take on somebody?
Yeah.
And if the movements, and I use the word technique. I guess it's not one technique.
Yeah.
But how do you decide that this may really work for you? Or is there ever a time where it's like, not quite getting there?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think the first thing, just kind of like our normal process, is what we do is when someone comes in-house, what we do is, first off, they reach out to us. They usually fill out a form or something like that online, or they reach out on social media. And then, Taylor kind of goes through the process where lets them know like who we are, what type of facility
Taylor's
we are.
great, by the way.
Yeah. Shout out to TC.
Yeah.
She does a great job of kind of giving that first layer of like, hey, this is who we are. This is what, we're not like a typical like lesson model or, some of these other things that they might be used to. So kind of just gives them understanding of who we are as a business and kind of what that process looks like. If somebody obviously is going to work remotely, then they're going to be sending like video, as you kind of imagine from that side. If they're going to come in-house, if they're going to be a fly-in, or if they're going to be someone that comes in and wants to train with us in-house, we do an evaluation. So we require all of our hitters to do an evaluation first.
Okay.
And so they first come in, we take them through an evaluation, and we actually we have a basic evaluation, and we also have a premium evaluation. Typically, like our high-end guys, our professionals, things like that, they'll do our high-end evaluations. But we do our basic eval, where we're going through force. They're going to get on the force plate, and we're also going to use Rapsodo, and we're going to go from a T front toss and then off the machine, or BP depending on the age, and we're going to measure from all those different levels, and then we basically sit down with them. We go over their data, what we're seeing, also what we're seeing from video with the swing cat setup. So those are Burtech force plates that we have out there.
Okay.
But SwingCat is the actual software and the camera system.
I was about to say, was that the
we
4?
utilize. Yeah, the
from
4
around?
cameras.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes.
All
Yeah, so that's SwingCat. So SwingCat, what we do there is, again, obviously with it, we can say all the science, but like this is, you have a phone in your pocket, right? When you see it in video, this is what it looks like. So we connect the dots for them of what, the data saying compared to how it shows up when you're actually moving and what you would be able to see on your own phone. And this is why you tend to see these things happen all the time. Like you always see at contact that you're in this position, or you see
Dragging,
this-
cutting.
yeah,
Yeah,
or
whatever it may
you do
be.
this weird arm move or whatever. Everybody has particular things, or when you go to stride, like how early your heel comes out of the ground, or things like random things that they might be able to see that we might be identifying for them. With that same process, like we tell them as well, is like, hey, like I think the whole process of who we select to come in, well, the first layer is Taylor, right? That first layer is Taylor, right? Is Taylor informing them of who we are and how they're going to train.
No, she really was a gatekeeper.
She did it. She was doing her filter process. Yeah. And again, along with that, she really helps on that same side is to make sure, one, that they know what they're getting themselves into, and like again, what they're walking in. And on the same side of that is, we do take in, we have a whole bunch of people that reach out that are younger that maybe it might be better for them to go on remote, or again, we just might not be a good fit for them. And so we filter that process. And also, let's be real, the real part too is like financially, right? Like, can they even
Can you
if they
get here?
through-
Can you? Yeah.
yeah, could they get here on time? Could they fit our scheduling? Could they also, on the same time, can they even afford to train with us for what they're looking for right now? Where it might be better, where maybe hey, they could afford to be on our remote training or one of our other options, or to come once every other week instead of every week, or to come, again, maybe they want to come in just for a fly-in and they're going to be here for a couple days and that's their plan. Okay, so we have to figure out what that looks like, and again, if that's a good fit, right?
Okay.
And then we sit down and obviously we go through evaluations, and we just get a good feel during the evaluations. Like we ask, the parents, we ask the players a lot of questions as well. You get a feel on who they are and if they're going to be a fit from there. I wouldn't say that, we definitely don't go, we don't think you're good enough to train here. That's not a filtering process for us.
I guess I'm instead of like being good, I guess it was more like body maturity wise and control.
Yeah.
And are you taking on baby giraffes, or are you taking on somebody that already has?
Yeah. So both.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, again, along even with that, with just like body types, we take, it doesn't really matter from that same way of like who we would take in or who we wouldn't take in. From there, it definitely, again, they just started playing this year and are super uncoordinated, or they could be, I play in the MLB, right? And there's everything in between. We definitely don't discriminate in that way. And then again, they don't need to be doing or be at a high enough like skill level or something like that to like this either.
And that just segue right into the next one is, one of the things that drew me to it, and I had told you earlier, I'm not a real big tech guy. Like I like watching it.
Yeah.
I can appreciate
Yeah.
what it can do,
For sure.
but deciphering everything and understanding, okay, this is what we're seeing. This is what all of these data points and numbers tell me. So this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
How much do you personally, or the people that train here with you, how much do y'all use the technology as opposed to what exactly that player's feeling?
Yeah.
Numbers wise, or we're just looking at these angles and we got to try to get here and then see what happens. Like what is the mix of that?
Yeah, no, it's well, the cool part is you got to experience a session.
It was awesome.
Yeah, so I'll ask you there.
Okay.
First thing just so you could tell everybody.
Okay.
How much tech did I use in that session?
Just your phone for video.
Yes.
There was nothing else.
Absolutely, right? So a lot of people get that interpretation as when they are looking at us they know that we use a bunch of tech.
Mm-hmm.
They get the ideology that they think that we're using it with every rep, with everything that we do. And I think of it like a MRI with a doctor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he uses it when he needs to use it, and he doesn't use it when he doesn't need to use it.
That's a really good analogy. And I feel the same. Now, obviously, I don't have cameras and screens and everything set up. It's my phone and my tablet with my analysis app.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing.
Yeah.
People, why don't you use more of that? Well, I can see what I need to see in one or two swings.
For sure.
And this player is going to have these tendencies. And so I don't want to overanalyze.
Yeah.
I don't want them to see all of this and, micromanage the swing.
Yeah. And it matters too, like you're saying, again, like when it comes into age groups, like we do that in our even our evaluations. Obviously, our older players, like we're gonna go more in depth with. Like for example, I always tell like the pro guys, like you got to remember, like these guys are making millions of dollars. So if you're gonna tell me, I kind of explain it like, if you're going to tell me I have cancer, right, and you're going to make some major changes and we're going to perform surgery right now, you better be able to show me on an MRI and some blood
for
work
sure.
and all these things of what's going on, right? But our youth athletes, even our evaluation for them is, again, we conduct that differently than we would with, obviously an older athlete. That's even why we have two different levels of evaluations, because the other evaluation we do KVS, we had in KVS, we had in Blast, we had in other technologies as well. So now we got kinematics, what the bat's doing, what the ball's doing off the bat, how they're using the ground, and forecast. Like we're
Boom, 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 boom,
yeah,
boom.
yeah, yeah. We got a full work.
Anything they want.
Yeah.
And I guess, and I'm sure at all levels, whether it be your high school high level, like the gentleman that was in here who was a freaking stud, or you get your professionals or your big time D1 softball.
Yeah.
Like some of them want all of that, and some of them are like, hey, dude, you just tell me what to do.
Yeah. Just I'm okay. Evaluation, like we're gonna do it because, again, and that's the other thing. The reason that we do an evaluation is also too, it's a big buy-in factor, right? Like again, along with it, you need to understand why we're working on what we're working on. So let me give you an idea, and also too, I look at it too, like they're picking me as well, right? They're picking to choose the train with us. So we're gonna tell them before we even get started, hey, this is what we would work on. This is why. Let's give you a little bit. Another part of our evaluations where a lot of people don't take this in is actually from the collection standpoint. It probably only takes us like 20 something minutes maybe to collect everything. Majority of the evaluation, which is usually like an hour and a half process, is okay. We got 20 minutes. Well, what's the other hour and 10 minutes? Is typically us sitting down and we educate them, right? And we go through and say, hey, again, this is what we're seeing. This is why, it's important. This is what we're actually going to train. And also too, this is from a breakdown. Like, again, here's the MRI machine showing you that there's this mass, or again, here's your x-ray or your broken bone. And here's, like showing them
the arthritis in your hip.
Yeah. Right. Where we're actually breaking down and looking at that. Or again, like maybe you have a tear in your tissue or something like that. That's what an MRI would be able to see. It's like you feel the pain, right? But what's actually torn, what muscle is actually torn, what's actually going on in there, right? And that's where we look at it as, like, again, like as a doctor, like, okay, like again, like a PT. A PT is going to use some technology, but also too, you're going to be doing exercises and you're going to be giving you cues and feels and all these things. So that's a big part with us as well, as like we utilize technology the most during an eval.
Okay.
But we definitely go back to it at times when we need to use it. I've also gotten to the point too where someone asked me the other day about KVest. He's like, man, do you really like KVS? I'm like, yeah, like it's, most dependable, like that we use for kinematics, blah, blah, blah. It syncs very well with swing catalyst, for example. Like when you use technology, a lot of these techs, like there's delays, right? So you click collect, well, it takes 6 seconds or whatever, right? So to collect all that data. So for example, like swing catalyst and K motion are almost identical times. So we can move and like, our collection process is only 20 something minutes, but by design, I pick technologies that specifically can do these things so that process isn't hindered, right? And so but that coach that reached out to me, and he was like talking to me about K motion. He's like, do you think it's really good for like younger kids? And I'm like, well, you don't really need a thermometer when the building's on fire. Like it's just like, kind of the analogy I gave him. It's like technology is awesome, right? And again, along with it, but me and Cody talk about this all the time, is that I've also had the privilege of using technology so much that what I can tell you what it's going to read before
it comes up.
Yeah. And again, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to tell you, and this is where it gets in deep. When you want to get exact numbers, exact speeds, exact positions, like, oh, that's 20 something degrees. Like I can give you within a range, right? But that's where if you really want to get in deep and you're running a study and you're doing those things, like, yes, you need to have the data to have the exact numbers, right? And like, again, especially like ground force. Like ground force is one of those that, for example, I'll tell you a story. So at one point, Anthony Rizzo with the Cubs, when he hits, a lot of times he keeps his front leg bent, right? And so they were measuring, saying like he probably doesn't get a lot of force into his front leg because he does that type of technique. So they measured him, and
it's a lot.
He creates a ton of force with his front leg and how he gets into the ground. And so they just thought, because of how it moved and because how they seen with their eyes and also their bias of how they seen other hitters, that they believed that wasn't going to happen.
It's a great example, man.
And so, or again, when I was consulting with another team, they had one of their top prospects in there, and he like rolls out of his front foot. So they were thinking like, oh, he must not really
He's
get his
pulling
butt.
off.
He's not creating enough force that way.
Yeah.
Well, they measure it, and he's creating elite amount of
Yes.
force that way. And actually, that's one of the reasons his foot comes out of the ground, is because he creates so much. And for a moment in time, like, he creates a tremendous amount of force, which is exactly when it needs to happen. And it's like, if they wouldn't have measured that, and they would have just aesthetically would have just changed it because they'd like it to look different, they could have hindered, obviously some of the ways that he was creating force. So, and that's where it becomes really different too, is, when you got someone that's making millions and millions of dollars, right, where if you make changes, it could really, again, it's a big
it
change,
affects,
right?
like,
It's not, oh, this weekend, little Johnny that's 10 years old
playing 5 games in 2 days.
Yeah, 100%. Like,
Yeah.
like, it's a different scenario, and we have time where if it was a bad route, like, we could fix it, right? Like, just because they're so young. But like, it's a different animal with that, and also too a different buy-in process with a major league athlete than it is for again,
sure.
a 10-year-old that's like, you're an adult, whatever you tell me to do, and you're my coach. I'm
Yeah,
gonna do
and
it.
these guys are thinking, well, I'm one of the best literally the best in the world.
Yeah,
And you're asking me to change this based on
Exactly.
what exactly?
I'm in the big leagues. I make tell me again when you're gonna make how much money I'm making.
Yeah.
It's like, like, there's a different
Yes.
level of respect that has to be gained there. And so again, like, when we go through that evaluation process, me showing you your MRI and your X-ray and showing you your blood work and taking you through your vitals and painting this picture and saying, hey, all of this, those are all pieces of the story. It still needs me to help you understand what this actually means to you. So one of my goals, I do this with a lot of our pro guys, is obviously when it's a big time pro guy, like, I've obviously seen them play and I know their charts, and like, I've seen how they play. But I try to not watch any of their stuff. I try not to look at any of their data before they
walk in the door.
Before they walk in. And so what I like to do is when they hit, I like to do this thing where I'll go through all their stuff and I'll paint a picture of like, hey, this is going to lead to this, 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 and this. You're going to have problems with this. You're going to have problems with fastballs up or sliders away or blah, 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 blah. Or, again, you're going to hit a lot more foul balls. You're going to have a lot of check swing strikes. I started like calling out these things, or every time you hit a ball oppo, it's, you're getting a whole bunch of slice with low launch angles. Like, you can't drive balls, oppo, or you can't pull the ball. Every time you pull the ball, either it's foul
hooked,
or again, like, there's some guys that physically cannot create the angle to get the barrel out where they can. And again, there's reasons of why that happens. So I like to do that with them where they're like, wow, because imagine that the buy-in that creates, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm defining your spray chart. I'm defining. I had 2 guys
without looking at your stuff.
Exactly.
That's the thing.
Huge. And that's where I've had guys tell me, like, they'll be like, you just told me my whole life of hitting in an hour, and I just hit you, right? And so the buy-in that creates of like, hey, like, I understand why these things are happening, and I understand how you create force as well. You're not a unicorn as well.
Yeah.
Like, you're, again, the human body can only create force in so many ways, and especially at an elite level, like, there's only so many strategies that you guys can do to create force, and you're bucketed like this, and this is why that you're gonna have issues with these type of things. And this is how we would go about fixing it. And then if, again, if they would like to choose to go about fixing it, well, then we'll move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that leads into the next one, but I think you probably already answered it, was not only the buy-in aspect, but let's say that you have somebody that walks in after the evaluation.
Yeah.
Is there, and I know there's no specifics, I know the way that people's body works, the way that people, process information, all has to deal with that.
Yeah.
But is there a certain amount of time where you see, okay, after 2 months, after 6 months, that they're starting not only to, because the buy-in process has already happened at that point,
For sure.
but that they're actually starting to make that swing their own and feel it and adjustments? Just is there a time frame?
So it's you asked some really important questions. So there's actually a couple different time frames. So if it's something that's like a muscle adaptation, generally you're going to see some results within 4 to 6 weeks, right? If it's we're just talking about
just move.
stability in a hip or something like that, right? Like, you're going to see some things like typical 4 to 6 weeks. Now, if it's a fascia thing, right, or it's a connective tissue thing, research with that says 1 to 2 years, right, where you see some massive changes in athletes. But I've seen it with elite athletes, like within 6 months, they could really have some different changes. And so, like, okay, that's just from like a body standpoint. Now, if you go into like, which is what a lot of us deal with as coaches as well, we got to keep those things in mind if we're trying to see some of these bigger changes and how those play into the body. But let's say it's a technique thing, and let's say it's a coordination thing, right? So they have the range of motion. Their body could go into that range of motion. They have stability there. They have all these things, like the prerequisites are done.
Yeah.
Right.
Physically, they're good.
They could do it.
Yeah.
Right. Coordination can be built in a second.
Okay.
Right. Like just it can. So for example, I
I
had
was about to say today.
yeah,
We
you
saw
guys,
it with him
massive
today.
changes.
Yeah. And granted, like I said, I've been doing this a minute,
Yeah.
but even just sitting back there,
Yeah.
I'd be like, nope.
Yep.
No, like it's easy if you
Mhm.
know what you're looking for. And in this case, I knew exactly where you were trying to get him and what
Yeah.
he was trying to do.
Absolutely.
And he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He can get there.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where like coordination can be instantaneous. Which is, I always say, like, movement is a mapping of your brain, right? So if I can get you, for example, if let's say, for example, like when you sign your name, right? So when you sign your name, like you in your head, you know what your signature looks like. So you're trying to create your signature when you
Okay.
sign it, right? But if I say, hey, we're going to start drawing your J's like this, right? And then we remap what a J looks like in your head. Well, that is going to, we can change that within your signature. And also now, if I just taught you that today, and then there's a difference between motor performance and motor learning, which is like, can I do it for one time? Or
I'll
can
say,
I?
now I have to go forge it that way.
Yeah, 100%. Right. Where if all of a sudden, let's say, again, we're out and about, you know, me and you went to dinner and
Yeah.
you just quickly sign your name, which J are you going to sign?
Yeah. I'm going to
Right?
default back.
Default
Yeah.
to your other one, right?
Yeah.
Until it becomes your new way that you just do all the time. It's your new pattern. That's how
Yeah.
you see things. So that's the other part as well, is like, again, coordination can be instantaneous, but also as long as that, if I want that to be the new dominant pattern, another analogy I always give with this is like, all right, let's like to work, like you generally drive the same way to work every single day, right? Now, let's say they built a new bridge. There's a new way to get to work, right? But you just never taken that route, and you never driven there in the morning. And you know what? It's raining today. You're late for work. All these things are happening. You're like, you're not going to try the new route, right? So this is what happens when players get in game, or again, like you saw when I all of a sudden I went to machine, he started wanting to go back to his old pattern, right? So that's why I immediately put the farm board underneath his feet. Was, hey, no, I want you to move this way. Right, this is how we want to create force, and here it creates more feedback.
I
So-
love the
so-
mental part, the two balls.
Yeah. Oh, the two balls.
That was like for
Yeah.
me today.
Yeah.
That was something that I can not only relate
Yeah.
to every single player, because
sure.
that wasn't we're trying to do this move.
Yeah.
It was, we're going to hit this one with the knowledge that another one's
Another one's
coming,
coming.
and I have to be in control.
Yeah,
It was-
100%. Yeah, and so again, what Josh talking about there, to catch everybody up,
Oh,
is
sorry.
hey, yeah, no, you're good. You're good. No, I'm glad you brought it up, because I do. It's a powerful thing that we use quite a bit, that I stole again from martial arts and old school wisdom of hitting coaches that have done rapid toss for years. Just different variations of how we do it, and so we constantly like to give. Sometimes instead of, obviously, there's a time and a place where I'll use like an internal cue of, hey, I want you to feel this in your hip. I want you to feel this with your right hand or your top hand or whatever this is, right? But there's also things, just like when we say, hey, drive this ball to right center, right? That's like an external cue. Well, you can also give, I call them destination cues. So destination cues are more like, hey, we call them like trout step overs, or like we're going to do a Correa step, something that's going to happen towards the end of the movement. And then your brain maps how to get there. And so it's almost like in your phone, right? If you know, again, let's say you live here, right? You live in Vegas. You're moving to Vegas, baby.
All right.
If you live in Vegas and
Can't
you
handle
know,
Vegas.
you know, and this is what Google Maps does, right? You give it this is where I am. This is where I want to finish. Google Maps goes
Yep.
and draws a map, right? And that's the route that you take to get here, right? So your brain does the same thing. So if you give it a destination of where it wants to go, it problem solves and figures out a way to do that.
It's very enlightening, number one, to hear you talk about these things, because now I think back and I do that. Like,
Yeah,
I do
things
those
that you-
things,
that you use
but
in
it's
other
not.
areas.
But it's not as scientific. It's not. And
Yep.
whenever you said the trout step through,
Yeah.
one of the things that I have for direction
Mhm.
is, when we're finished, we want to think about over home plate.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to go a certain direct, go over home plate.
Yeah.
And there's no other thought
That's it.
other than that, and that just
Cleans up a lot.
Oh.
Yeah. And that's kind of
quick, and it's one of those that's like instant.
instant, right? And again, it can clean up a lot of things, because there's only so many ways to make that happen. And the brain, okay, well, this is how I have to move if I want that to be the result. And so the reason that I've gotten into a lot of the science side is like you're saying is just like what I did for you is when I give you the principle, then you can go, well, what can I create from here? I
Yeah.
can give a whole bunch of destination cues. Now I know why it works. Like I know, okay, now you can start, again, you start giving all these other things. So we use destination cues like that all the time. And it, again, helps their body organize in a way where, again, you could create all this coordination or a new movement because you give something that they have to do at the end. So particularly what Josh was talking about there was we'll do kind of like rapid toss, but I do it with heavy balls a majority of the time. And what we'll do is, again, is after they hit a ball, immediately we're going to throw another one. And so what it really is going to force you there, bless you, Jarrell. Don't think I'm on the podcast. I want to say bless you. But also that when you're on the same thing too, as you're going to hit there, is just like you're saying, as I stole from martial arts, the reason that they do so many kicks in a row, because you'll never do more than 2 kicks. So why are they doing 50? Why are they doing 15s? Why are they doing 10s? Again, not only is it what it's doing for the brain to do something rapidly over and over and over and over again, but also on top of that, the stability it requires, the balance it requires, again, the technique it requires to be able to, again, get back to my start position so I could fire again from the same spot. It makes me so I don't lunge. It makes me so I don't drift. It makes me so I don't yank and spin. It makes me so all these things that could happen, right? It's a good way, instead of having to cue all of that, we can use a destination cue that really can sometimes.
Well, I saw it work instantly. Like we keep snapping because that's how it was. And granted, y'all, the person we're talking about is an elite high school level,
for sure,
17-year-old kid
who's been training with us,
yeah, who's been there. I mean, this isn't somebody not just walking in. And again, we're doing a really good job of just going to the next question I have because it's just rolling, man. Because the next one is, what do you recommend or what are your requirements for these people outside of here? Because I was talking to his dad for a minute, and they try to get here every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks.
So what's he doing?
SoCal,
Coming in from California every 2 weeks. So from the time he leaves now until he comes back in another 2 weeks.
Yep.
What do you talk to him about? Is there an outline for that?
Yeah. So we offer different things, right? So again, I always tell people, I really do think, and one thing I've been really tapping into lately is I kind of feel more like a swing therapist than I feel like, and let me make the connection for you, is I kind of think of it like in the same way as like a therapy session. Like, hey, I can be as involved as you want me to be, or not as involved as you don't want me to be. Like, I'm not going to force myself, to like, hey, you have to do this, right? And also too, along with that, right, it's also, what the parent and also the player wants to do, right? So we do have, again, we have players where, again, they'll come in and I'm not going to see them for 2 weeks. Well, we kind of have like a hybrid where they're also on remote training. So the week that they're not here, they're sending in video of them going through, again, a prescribed or prescription that we have given them. And they're going through those movements. They send them in, right? And again, we have an app where they send those through, and then we respond to those and then give them feedback. And either maybe we progress that drill or give them another drill, or maybe they stay with the same drill and they're just doing it better at a higher quality with this new cues or things that we've given them. And then again, I'll see them in person the next week, right? So sometimes that's the case as well. And then sometimes, like, again, certain players, it's, hey, they're going to take what they did. Like a lot of times when I see players week to week, so we have a whole bunch of pro guys that will come in for, like, right now there's a kid that's coming in that he comes every week, Monday, Tuesday from Arizona, every week. So Monday, Tuesday, he hits with me, he leaves. Usually Thursday or Friday, he sends me video just to get eyes on how his work was that day. And then he comes back the next Monday and Tuesday. And so he's working on what we worked on Monday and Tuesday. And then by the time I see him next Monday and Tuesday, again, he might be good enough where we progress from that point, or again, we stay the same.
Stay the course.
Stay the course. And we are getting him ready. And I have the timeline in my head that he has to be ready for spring training. He's also a catcher. So like I keep all these things in mind, and then I plan his off season. And at some point you got to go, hey, it's race day. This is the car I got. This is what
let's go test it out and see what we got.
And it slightly pulls to the right a little bit. Okay, well, the driver's going to slightly lean this thing to the left, or maybe I got to set up in the box a certain way, or up, back, in, out, change orientation a little, this way where it gives me some of those angles. Or again, you know what? This type of matchup is going to really give me some troubles. And so I need to realize, like, I do not want to get to his slider because I'm not moving too well to hit that right now. And I can't miss the fastball.
There you
right?
go.
And that's an important thing. So we learned, like, wherever they are, and then we developed their approach based off of obviously how they're moving.
I love that, basing the approach. Man, that's all that I had for you. Like I said, I can sit here and chop up about hitting as long as you want. I think we wanted to look at some K-Best stuff. Is that still
I wanted, I
okay?
wanted to show you some of the technologies that you talked about.
Okay.
And also, you can see, because it's not as intimidating too. I think a lot of people too, it's like the getting started. And, I wanna and also too, when you have a guide, I feel like I'm the same way. Again,
Yeah.
like, like you produce some really good hitters. There's a lot of these things I'm like prove you right, of like why we use certain cues and why they work. So the first thing that I want to look into is to start at the ground. I was going to look at the swing cats and like how they bring in force plate data, and I wanted to kind of show you what's going on and what we're seeing,
Okay.
and some of the things that we kind of talk about. So
I've been eyeing that thing all day.
Yeah.
I was like, I wonder if we're gonna get on this ground force thing.
yeah, so
All right.
this is what swing cat looks like.
Okay.
And again, if you're just listening on the podcast, bear with me here. You can also go watch the video for him. But this is actually a pro guy. He's played for quite a long time and is actually making some good money right now over in Japan. But with this, okay, so what we're looking at is there's 3 different forces that are going on. A lot of times we say ground force and we think it's just one number.
It's multiple and
every direction that we can press into the ground is a vector, is what they call it.
we're talking like
Direction.
toes and heels and
Yeah, so like you could be pushing to the catcher. You could also be pushing towards the pitcher. You could also be pushing behind you, like behind your butt. You could also be pushing towards home plate. Those are all different directions. You could also be pushing straight down and jumping straight in the air. These are all different forces. And then on top of that, you also have torque, right? Which is one that we all hear from, right? Torque is like when you see the farm boards, they slide back and forth. You're creating a horizontal shear force, but all they're doing is think of it in simple terms, right? If I had the cell phone, right? Or if you're imagining in your head, if you're listening, if you're opening a water bottle, right? You put your thumb on one side and your finger on the other side, and you twist it, right? That twist, that force that's being caused where there's 2 forces that are working against each other, opposing forces, it creates rotation, right? So think about if you were going to turn a mattress, right? If you're listening, right? Same thing. If you're listening and trying to turn a mattress, you'd grab one of the corners, and if you push one side, you're going to start creating rotation, right? Well, if you have somebody on, let's say you're in a really tight area, and we got to just rotate the mattress in place. Well, if the other person grabs the corner, the opposite opposing corner, the diagonal corner, and you pick those up and you guys walk in a circle, well, now you're going to have a real tight rotation, right? Rather than the back
one side and
swinging
loosen
out.
out. Yeah.
Exactly. So we can measure those things and how we're creating force, and we can measure also with our force plates. The reason they're so expensive is because a lot of people that have force plates are only measuring vertical, right? It's like jumping.
Yeah, and landing.
Yeah, so so if you only look at that and you go, we're going to focus on how much vertical force we could, well, you're missing a lot of force.
Yeah.
Right? And vertical force, again, while it is important within the swing, there's also these other forces like torque that are massively important.
Well, and that's how when you talk about getting more into like that squat.
Yeah.
Versus we were talking about keeping the hips low.
Yeah.
Without getting down, so
Yes.
that you can do that.
Yeah.
When I jumped on that farm board max when I first walked in,
Yeah.
I kind of just experimented with it, and I think I was I told you, I was like, man, I tried just turning, this back leg and going. I was like, nothing.
Didn't move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I got and I felt like snowboarding, right?
Yeah.
And just
It's a great analogy.
and go, and it went.
And it went. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that becomes, again, you started going from your core and your middle rather than, just driving with a single leg, right? And this is the thing of like we've been talking about for years. Like one of the things that is massive is like we get on force plates. A lot of times people say, it starts from the ground up, right? So go ahead, Code. You can jump back to the force plate real quick. So one of the things that we see is like, and just back up for a little bit, kind of right before he's striding forward. So, there you go. Perfect. So as he starts to stride, some of the things that we're actually looking at, and one of the issues, like as players and even this pro guy, a lot of things, people also think that pros are the most efficient, right? They should watch their video and mimic them perfectly, right? The problem is they're the most athletic and they're the strongest and they're usually the biggest.
So they can make up for the deficiencies.
They can make up for these deficiencies.
Yeah.
So modeling directly after this guy, even he's a pretty good hitter. So if we go into this, as he's going forward, now look at this purple graph, the one in the middle here.
Yep.
So you see how it starts like going up. You can see how like as he's going right now, it's going up towards the top. That is him pushing towards the catcher.
Okay.
So he's pushing out of his back leg forward towards the catcher.
Okay.
I mean, sorry, towards the pitcher, but pushing
toward the
towards
pitcher, but pushing the force back.
Yes.
Okay.
So he's pushing the ground towards the catcher so he can propel
He's going
himself.
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another way, again, this is the one thing with force plates that we have to always remember is you have the action and reaction that always happens, right? That's why it's called ground reaction force. Is you think about it when you're sitting in a jet, right? The jet blows out
that way, and you're going
so that you could go
yeah.
forward, right? So that's how it also works when you're in the ground. You push into the ground one way, it propels you forward. Now, with that, that's one strategy of getting forward. The problem with that, though, too, is he battles with a ton, is that he's a pretty good athlete, which you're also going to see as soon as he gets his front foot in the ground, now you're going to see the graph actually do the opposite. It's going to drive down. It's going to go negative.
So now he's going everything forward.
Towards the pitcher.
Yeah.
So he is able to create a ton of force towards the pitcher to stop him from going forward, right? So you would also think about, well, what's another way I could get forward without pushing? Well, this is where we all talk about like screwing our back leg into the ground.
Okay.
That's a torque, right? And if you also think about it, if you're standing 50-50 between both feet, right? If I pick up one of my feet, I'm going to immediately go forward, right? So the only way to stop that is either stacking on my backside, right? Or the other way is I can control it actually with my pelvis is when we teach that screwing motion with that back right leg. It actually, that twist helps me control my forward move. So this is one thing when we talk about with him where, he can have problems with certain pitches and how he's attempting to create force. It's something that we can point out and say, hey, this isn't, again, I can show you other hitters. I can show you the things. And again, I can show you within this MRI, right? Or in this particular case, just your force plate reading, right? That this is how you create force. And it's not my subjective eye or what I think. Like this is the force that's
the science.
The
this
ground.
is what it says.
Yeah, this is what it says. This is the force and how you're creating it. And this is how other guys do it, right? And now also too, as he goes into that, right now, the blue graph is vertical force, right? So we're going to see a spike in vertical force as he gets his front heel in the ground, right? His front heel. That blue graph spikes, right? Because that's him driving down straight down into the ground, like if he was going to jump out of the ground with his front leg, right? So as people would think about that, well, there's a minimum that we know we need to be within, right? So in baseball, it's 180%. So 180% of your body weight that we need to get
into the front side.
That is like right there. If you see in that same graph where the peak is, you see how the graph changes color behind it? It's like kind of dark.
Yep.
That's PGA average.
Okay.
Right. So it's a range. There's a range there. So there's a range that we want to be within where pro guys are not below that range. Right. So there's a range that gives us some idea of like,
so
hey,
if that spike's underneath there, he needs significant work.
Yeah. There's something going on of why he's not getting into his front side. And so for people to say like, you don't need to get into your front side. And look, all of this has happened before he's launched his barrel. This is him getting his front heel into the ground, right? Like this is before he's going in. So this is where one of the biggest things I learned when I went into force plate data, right, is that how important the front leg is and all the forces that it's happening, where most hitting coaches are emphasizing so much back leg.
I was about to say, can we repeat that? The front leg is really important.
Really, really important.
Can we just hit that again?
Yes. And it's not, this is something that is not a, again, when we can measure it, right, you can say, and then some people are like, oh, you can't tell the difference between accepting force and creating force. And I'm like, well, actually, you can. Yeah, like force plate data, it's actually, there's a lot of ways where you can see, like, even if you look back at that graph, that vertical force graph, right? Right now, as it's going negative, that is him accepting force.
Okay.
Right? When it goes positive, that is him
creating
force. So accepting would be like the eccentric part of it, and then the concentric part of him like driving. And that's also why you actually watch his front hip right after he created that vertical force. You're always going to see force before you see movement.
Okay.
So for example, this phone is going to sit here, right? This phone is going to sit here until another force acts upon it, right? So if I push it, it will then move.
Okay.
Right. So you're going to see force, then motion.
Okay.
So when we see ground force, you're going to see force
down,
and then you'll see the movement. So another way, okay, and vertical might be a little bit harder to see, but go ahead and go to the top of torque code so we can kind of see there. Okay, so right now, this is peak positive torque. So this is the maximum amount of positive torque that he's creating for rotation is happening right now. See how
it doesn't look like anything's turned.
He hasn't rotated yet.
Yeah.
Right? So this is why it's so important when we start giving these cues like kaboom or any of these timing cues, we're actually teaching them how and when they're creating force and what forces are happening. If they do boom early, right, then they're creating that torque too early, right, or at the wrong times. And there is a sequence, like professional athletes have a sequence just like with kinematics that are a way that they create force.
So, and that's when you get things out of order.
Yes.
And you lose the control and you lose the stability.
They're flying open before the front foot ever gets in the ground or things like that. Like we can measure all that, right? So instead of that being and just a subjective opinion of, this is how I'd like it to look. Well, like we can measure them, like, are they actually creating these forces at the right times in the right places, right?
That's awesome.
So we go into that. And so becomes some of the crazy stuff I want to get into is what you see is when you look at those graphs, vertical is a little bit different because of the force that it's being created, and it's actually decelling. Creating vertical force is going to decel me. It's going to stop me from rotating, right? So like if I get into the ground with my front leg, when that thing hits the ground and that energy shoots up my body, it's going to send that energy up, which is what we really want.
The brace.
Yeah, so that bracing with that front leg, right? So now also the next graph, horizontal, what you're also going to get is you see those big negative spikes. It goes below 0. It goes back the opposite way. Now, they're like and all of our elite guys are 2 to 3 times as much force stopping than they are accelerating.
Yes. In motion.
And so, okay, well then you look at this and go, okay, well, like when he's going into the ground, he's pushing towards the pitcher 2 to 3 times as hard as he was pushing from the catcher. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So he's trying to stop way harder, right? If he knows it or not, right? He's creating that amount of force to stop his body from drifting and going forward, right? Now, when you go into, torque, for example, on this last graph, that yellow graph there, right?
Okay.
So you're going to see kind of something a little bit different. So he's going to go at the top. This was positive torque, right? This is as much torque as he has. Watch what happens as he's going into contact. Watch what that graph does.
Oh, it's negative. That's the decel.
Yes. So that is when I talk about reverse torque.
Yeah.
I talk about why it's so important to decel and like stopping rotation and all that stuff. As he's at peak, he just went past peak reverse torque when he's going into contact, right? So these are things that we've been seeing, and this is what we created the Farm Boy Max for, and these other things as well, is like teaching our body how we're actually sequencing. Is that these guys as well, as they're our best hitters in the world. Now his is not 2 to 3 times as much decel into contact with the reverse as he is positive. Well, this is also why he struggles with certain things. And even though, again, that's why he also uses so much vertical force and also so much negative horizontal, is he's trying to use these other forces to stop himself from rotating, right? And on top of that as well, this is something when this was during his eval, this is something that we worked on. And the best hitters in the world, like they do that better.
Yeah.
And that gives them more adjustability. That also gives them, we actually talked about this earlier with like Tiger Woods, for example.
Oh yeah, the stop.
When he goes and he does that move where he gets to the top and he like stops his backswing on his way down. And all these golfers are like, this is the other thing people run past. If you're not a golfer, that doesn't amaze you. You're like, so what, he stopped.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But if you're a golfer and and you come back and you go to swing and you're like, he just stops? I could never stop like that. That's crazy. But that's the difference, is how he's creating force. So what we'll see is not every guy, like, again, he's a really good hitter. So with this hitter, he usually hits like 30 jacks in like a AAA.
Okay.
Like, he's
legit.
Yeah,
he's legit.
He led the PCL in home runs.
Okay.
Batted like 3 something. Like, I mean, he was a dude, right?
Yeah.
So, in the same thing, he's getting some of that decel, but he's not elite of the elite.
Well, I was gonna say,
right?
when you said he's trying to, and I don't remember exactly how you were, he's trying to create force, stop force from other areas.
Yes.
Where does that default to generally?
Yeah. So what you're talking about is, so you got segmental deceleration. And this is what people think, like, okay, well, if I'm trying to create speed, why would I want to stop? Doesn't make any sense. Like, why would I want to stop? And also, why would I want to go in reverse? Like, that don't make any sense, right? Think of it like a whip, right? If I take a whip above my head and I do this, positive torque, right?
Yeah.
But if I want maximum speed, segmental deceleration is I stop my hand, right? And it sends all of that energy down to the end of the whip, and then you hear the crack at the end of the whip, right? So what he's doing is his lower half is decelerating rapidly, hard, right? And so we can actually look at this too. You can jump to K-Vest now too as well. This is what we look. So K-Vest, we're going to see the kinematics. This is going to be what it looks like pelvis, trunk, lead arm, and a sensor in the hand, right?
Okay.
So energy going up the body. Okay. So we just grabbed a random graph from online. This isn't the greatest. It's also not the worst, right? But for example, what you're going to see is that last black line, right? There's 3 black lines. The last black line is contact.
Okay.
Right. So after contact, the red is the pelvis, right? So you see it, 0 is that gray line, that's right underneath it. That's 0. See how the pelvis goes underneath?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the pelvis is actually going in reverse. It's literally going backwards in space.
And that's, man, is that almost where you hear people talk about like front hip back? Is that
Yeah. So
kinda-
yeah. So there's a counter rotation. So a lot of times we'll post of like counter rotation, and people will think it's the load part, which is counter rotation.
Mhm.
But there's another counter rotation that happens in the swing, and that is like this guy is doing it. It's a little late.
okay?
Not a little late.
Not a lot late.
It's late. Yeah. So he's doing it, but it's late, and it also correlates with how he created force in the first place. When I'm looking at this graph, I'm looking at so that what that should be is a sharp. If you look at his pelvis here on the red, right, is it comes up and it's kind of like a rolling hill, and then
should it-
shoots again, and then jumps back up. It should be just a
spike.
spike.
Yeah.
Come back down, right?
Okay.
So again, he does some other things well, but yeah, there's something going on with his pelvis and how he's creating force that way, right? He's probably like doing like a big lead blade turn in, or he's doing something of how he's creating that force that's causing that issue. So in any case, they look at Rory McIlroy back in the day, and when he was on Sports Science, and if you go back, you can still find a segment. He goes back. Actually, Greg Rose was inside that segment as well.
Okay.
He comes down and he goes to hit the ball, and he goes, "This is the amazing part: is that not only does his hips go backwards right after contact, they go so hard backwards that he rotates them backwards faster than amateurs can rotate their hips forward." Right? And then they follow with, and then they follow up, and then they follow up with.
It's just stupid.
ridiculous.
Hold on, I'm trying to wrap. Hold on, time out.
So not only does
He
he
goes
stop-
backwards more faster than amateurs go
even
in their
rotate 'em
in their primary move.
Yes.
Dude, that's like James Harden and his stop ability.
Yes, exactly. No, that's
The-
literally, exactly what you just thought.
yeah.
That's insane. That's what makes him elite.
Yeah.
Is how hard he can stop,
Yes.
not just how hard can he create. And this is where we talked about like haymakers, right? We're talking about this
Yeah.
earlier. Is the ability to get off that, the ability to turn my body into a whip is what makes me elite, right? When I'm actually going in, we measure some of these top hitters. So when we train these things, and you look at like recoil swings, you see us doing rapid toss and all these other things. The reason we're going so deep into that is we've measured this, and we
Yeah.
also know that when we train it, that we're getting adaptations. And again, our best hitters were able to create these moves and these forces. And it doesn't look like traditional training. There's a lot of things that we go into, and that's why also, for example, again, even this guy that stops, he just stops late. It's going to be problematic with how he's transferring force up his body, and you're going to have some other issues. Like, for example, his pelvis to his trunk isn't great. Like, it could be a lot better, the transfer of speed from his pelvis to his trunk, which is not bad, but where you really see it is the trunk to the lead arm. So the trunk is the green,
Okay.
the blue is the lead arm. You see how close they are?
Yeah, I
together?
was about to say, should they mirror each other? Like,
So there
Or-
should be. It's not going to be as big of a
Not
gain
mirror,
from the
but-
pelvis to the trunk, because that's your obliques, like massive
Yeah.
muscles firing. But that transfer of speed from your trunk to your lead arm is very significant.
okay.
And so again, it's another link in the chain of turning your body into a whip and getting the
So
back
that
of the ball.
overlay, they should be pretty close in the overlay there.
No, they
Like,
should be further apart.
They should be further apart.
Yeah, so it's
Okay.
gaining more speed up the
Okay.
body, right? So they're close together because he's dragging.
He's drag. Okay, they're
Yeah.
close here, which is bad.
Yes.
We should see that
bigger
more. Okay.
separation. Yeah. So because the pelvis stops late, because this is the other thing, look at contact again. So look where the red is at contact. You see how fast the pelvis is still moving at
Mhm.
contact? That's bad.
Okay.
Like elite hitters are literally bottomed out, like at 0, and then right after contact, negative. So think of it like this. You ever driven a boat? I don't know if you. I don't know.
I mean, I've been in a boat. I haven't like driven a boat.
Well,
but
yeah, listen, someone needs to let Josh drive the boat. All right. But think of it like this too. Okay, there's only 3 ways to stop a boat, right? I can kill the engine and let the friction of the water just slow me down, right? I can drop an anchor, 2, or I could throw the boat in reverse. That's my brakes.
Okay.
So what happens is, this is what happens though, or you can do a combination of all 3, which is what elite hitters do.
Gotcha.
What they do is they stop creating positive
They
force,
turn
right?
off the engine.
Rotation. They turn off the engine.
Yep.
They drop the anchor by leaving their back leg in the ground and creating tension across their body,
Holding the ground.
holding the ground, right?
Okay.
Right. And then they fire their body in reverse, which we can measure,
Yep.
right? That they are actually rotating in reverse. If they think it or not, right? It doesn't matter. This is how, again, that the forces they actually are creating is that what happens is when think about a boat, when it finally comes to a stop, what's going to happen?
Just kind of
It's going to actually go in
backs up a
reverse
little bit. Yeah.
because
Always.
it's been in reverse the whole time. You saw the boat slowing down because they put on the reverse thrusters, but it took a second to slow the boat down, right? Think of it like this. When you're pulling up to a stoplight, right? You're pressing on the brake, but the car is still going forward,
Forward.
right? if I was putting on reverse thrusters like I was in water, right? When I finally stopped, the reverse is I'm actually going to go reverse. So McElroy is firing so hard in reverse that when he actually stops, he fires backwards than amateurs can fire forward.
That's just mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling.
He's like
right?
5'8", 100 and...
That's why. And then that's what, you know what they did? This is what sports science said. I love sports science, but this is what they said right after they said that statement. That's so amazing. But that's not why he can hit the ball so hard.
And then...
exactly why he can hit the ball so hard.
I was about to say, what did they follow that with? The reason that he can is because...
because everybody's so focused on the positive speed.
Yeah.
He does create insane positive speeds. But they're saying the same thing too. They at the time, and this is a 10-year-old segment now.
Okay.
But they didn't understand how...
the whip effect.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how, everybody would agree with the whip effect, but how does the body actually do it?
Creating it.
Train it and how these things. So that's why, for example, when we look at these things, right, and we break these down for hitters and we create this buy and all these things as well. And then also we can show them when we do drills, we can measure all the things and X, Y, and Z. But a lot of people too will see us doing drills, right? And they think that we're training a kickback. But what they're not understanding is we're training reverse torque and we're training reverse. The leg may go behind or it may not. It may stay in the ground. They might be doing, again, the force needs to happen. And we're training their body to sequence and create that force. And that's why me and Cody specifically right now, when we were looking up KVS charts, we have such an easy job of cleaning up sequencing. Like that is not a problem. You know, like with us, when we clean up K-motion, like how efficient guys transfer force, it's so easy for us to do, but it comes back into the mapping of the coach's brain of how they see movement, right? That when we were looking up charts right now, it took us so long to find a
good one,
chart, right? Where
I heard you over there. He's like, nope.
That's bad. That's bad. Like we couldn't even find one that was decent. Right? Like it took even that one was like okay. Like we were like, man, like I was gonna go grab it from my other computer out of there because it's like we have so many that I can just go and grab. But again, along with that, it's because of how when we teach, for example, another thing the KVS chart. The other thing is as well is that a lot of people think they're trying to spin their lower body like as hard as they can, right? But what people don't understand is like when it comes back to pelvis speed, pro pelvis speed is the easiest thing to gain. I have 13-year-olds that can rotate their pelvis that far, that fast, and and then people go, well, yeah, but they're bigger. Okay, I have average Joes that can create the same pelvis speed as a pro guy. The pelvis speed is easy. That the getting speed with the lower half is the easiest thing to achieve. Getting the speed up the body, now that's the massive separator.
Well, and that's the thing that was really impressive. Something that I didn't understand what you did is when y'all had the medicine ball at the very beginning.
Yes.
With the chops.
Yes.
And it was like, dude, we're using this here.
Yeah.
To get this going.
Yeah.
And we didn't see anything in the legs. There was no fire your hip. There was no get your backside through.
Nope.
None of that.
None of that.
It was just and I don't remember your exact terminology again, the crossbody.
Yeah, these obliques, yeah.
Yeah, and just coming here and to the naked eye.
Yep.
It was different.
Yes.
Like when he got it right, and even my brother here, who, he's not a baseball guy, he's a golfer, but even he was sitting there, he was like, yeah. Like, yeah. And you could see it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, for example, too. This is why I always get on social media. I think it's so funny when people will say, you just pointed out a great analogy of this, is that people will be like, he's not using his legs. But with the farm board moving and with ground, when we measure ground, no, he's using his legs.
Using it, just different.
Different.
Yes.
He's using his legs differently. And because you don't see them spinning, yanking, over-rotating, all these other things, because of that, like the number one deficiency that, again, like Greg Rose said this on a podcast with Driveline a little while back ago too, is like the number one deficiency that we see between with a lot of hitters that struggle with as golfers, baseball players, the same thing, is their ability to transfer speed from their pelvis to their trunk. So instead of using their body like a whip, they use it like a tow rope. So what they do is the pelvis just keeps driving,
going,
and the trailer can only go as fast as the car in front of it, right? Where we don't want to use our body like a tow rope, we want to use it like a whip, right? And so people think about using their bat like a whip, but it's your body that is the whip, right? And so we train along with that, and we go all those motions as well. That's why a lot of our guys can do such small movements and create it within short periods of time. Is like that's where the technique becomes your power, right? And I tell guys, like, the technique is the power. And again, like, your ability to stop, your ability to transfer speed. And we always go back to the 3 pillars, right? So we say, like, the best hitters in the world, there's 3 pillars that we pay attention to in, like, our philosophy of how we train. Is space, right? My ability to stay inside the ball, right? My ability to hit the ball clean. All those things are all attached to space, right? Direction, right? My ability to stay through the ball, right? Very important.
Yeah.
Again, it gives me adjustability within my swing. Also, too, like we talked about earlier, how often are you perfectly on time?
Yeah, very rarely.
Very
Yes.
rare, right? And then the last one, very important, the wording here, force transmission, not force production.
Not forced.
I know a whole bunch of hitters. There's a ton
that
of hitters.
produce tons.
Produce tons. But my ability to get it actually into the ball is really important, right? Which, again, also comes back to hitting it clean and some of those other attributes. And they all tie into each other, right? They all tie into each other. They all overlap, and they're all individual also as well. They all have different things that tie in that are just specific towards each one of them.
I was impressed with the lack of high intensity,
Yes.
but you're still getting a very intense
jumping.
result.
Yeah, balls jumping.
And you get those 1.5-pound weighted balls,
Yeah.
and it wasn't, hey, dude, get into it.
Yeah.
It was, hey, be quicker to it.
Yeah.
Hey, be more efficient to it.
Yeah.
And again, to the naked eye,
Yeah.
it was different.
For sure.
And that's one of those things I think that's extremely important, especially with the younger players,
Yeah.
is when you start putting high intensity without the control or without the understanding,
Yeah.
all you're doing is getting out of control.
Yes.
And the name of this game is barrels, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Find barrels.
Yep.
And very, very seldom, I think we were talking, he said,
Yeah.
John Daly talking about the golf swing, getting
Yeah.
back there and just going crazy,
Yeah.
that very seldom are you going to find somebody, if ever, that can go super high intensity
Yeah.
and be under control
Yep.
and hold direction
Yep.
and transmit force the correct way.
For sure. And again, like, I have nothing against speed. I don't think you do either.
No.
Right? We're not against speed. It's more about how we train to get that speed. So, for example, like when I'm teaching someone to develop their right cross, right? It's not that I'm against speed, but for example, Cody grabbed a quote the other day from Tiger Woods where he was talking about how his dad's rules for swinging hard, right? And he was golfing, and his dad would tell him, "Hey, you can swing as hard as you want, but
You got to hit it solid.
it has to. Yeah, there's a couple
Yeah.
things that you have to do, right?" And when we went into that, he was like, "Okay, first off, right? Like we want to hit the middle of the face, right? Like square it up,
Yep.
right? And then what was the other one too, Cody? Oh yeah, and balance. And you have to balance that. Then
a
there's
balance
swing,
word.
right? So this other thing, right? So this is the interesting thing with the word balance, right? So we use that a lot, right? And to a kid, it connects. They know what it feels like to be balanced. But when you look into the body, what does the body have to do to create balance, right? And so one of the things that's really important that we overlook all the time is, think about it. If you're creating all that positive torque, right? You're rotating this way as hard as possible. Well, again, if I want to be balanced,
I got to stop it.
I need to stop it.
Yeah.
I need to. And how does my body stop? It doesn't have. It's not just firing, like. And this is what I'll do with guys all the time too. Oh, I know this will actually be a funny thing for you here. I'll go over there and show you. Okay, so stand up for me real quick.
All right.
So what I'm going to do, let me see, we're still in. Let me get out of the way this way I can see it. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to try to open your hips, right?
Okay.
Don't let me open your hips. See how when I let go, your hips actually went back the
went
opposite
that
direction,
way.
right?
Yeah.
So while
And it popped my SI. That was awesome.
yeah. So when we looked at that, oh yeah, you grab your mic back. Sorry. So when we just did what we just did there, right? Is you were trying to stop me from rotating you. The only way your body can stop me from rotating you is by
counter.
firing the opposite direction, right? So again, if I want to be balanced, I also need to know how to balance forces, right? And again, when you're teaching a kid balance, why that could be a really great cue, what's really happening underneath in the body is it's actually creating a counter movement.
Dude, it's good stuff, man. It really is.
We got in the weeds a little bit, but it's, yeah.
And I love getting in the weeds.
Yeah.
Like, I don't mind that at all.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that it's like you hear people talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's people out there that I feel like I have a really good understanding of how the swing happens and all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to take high technology information,
Yeah.
apply it in simple terms,
Mhm.
and then apply it to kids that don't have the physical
For sure.
ability.
For sure.
You know, just as soon as you said
Yeah.
to stay balanced, what do you have to do the other way?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, I know what I'm going to do with this kid tomorrow.
But yeah,
Like
that's cool.
this kid that is on the balance beam and is
Yeah.
always falling off.
Yeah.
It's because they can't stop the rotation, and so we're going to go the other way.
Yeah, exactly. So then you start, and then also too, it's a different thing as well. People start going like, well, could I just train rotation the opposite way? And it's a yes and a no, right? And what I mean by that is you also think of like muscles is, for example, the reason that I can't just like swing left-handed, right? Not that I shouldn't do this either, right? Like you could swing left-handed, throw med balls left-handed, all those things as well. But also you got to remember that when you're rotating away in one direction, you're also eccentrically stretching, right? So you're stretching away. So think of it like this, like bicep, right? So you have a concentric and eccentric back this way, right? So the difference is it's not training my body to, this would be my tricep, extend it this way as fast as I can. That's
not what you want.
That's not what I'm doing. We're eccentrically loading that bicep back the opposite way and how it extends. So that's why I can't just train my tricep
to go.
I have to train the bicep to be eccentrically loaded the opposite way. So that's what happens when we have to try to not rotate, right?
Well,
we have to train to not rotate.
And that's where, and I don't, what's the little red contraption that you had?
Pure torque.
Yeah. So you had that with the band on it.
Oh yeah.
And the first time he went in there, boom, and you're like, no, slow back.
Yeah. I'm going to, you need to resist me.
Yes.
You back the opposite direction. Right. And also too, even when, as we go, like when he goes to rotate away, some of the things that we talk about as well is like, you know, him, when a guy goes to rotate, it's a very different skill. And that's where it becomes, it's not that I don't want to rotate. It's that I physically want to do what we're talking about, like develop brakes or reverse, right? We're developing our reverse thrusters, right? When we're actually hitting into the ball, that really, again, creates a dynamic training.
I'm going to have to get with you on that. I'll need some more information on that. That's the one that's just kind of, okay.
For sure.
So,
but that's where we start going down these paths. That's why when people see us doing like all these drills, right? And then I love when people say, man, like people reinventing the wheel. I'm like, okay, hold on. First off, when the wheel was first created, compared to now, okay, the wheel on your car does not look like what was on that, you know,
back in the Roman days.
Yeah, horse and carriage. It is a very different wheel.
Yeah,
it's the same task. It's the same game, right? But we're just learning more and getting more sophisticated about how specifically we can train
making them more efficient.
Yeah,
making them better.
And again, instead of going, and I get it, it is the hard part of psychology here, right? Is like you want to look at Ken Griffey Jr. And I say this all the time with kids, with like Mike Trout. I do this with them all the time. I say, look, Mike Trout isn't performing a magic trick. He's not a superhuman being, right? He is a human being that is using physics, right? And he can do things better. He moves better than you. He's stronger than you. He's bigger than you, right? You put all those three things together, he's a better baseball player than you, right? So it's not a magic trick, right? We can measure it. We can figure out what he's doing, and we can train you to be more like him, right? But with that being said, yes, there is things that are, again, along with it, like, again, genetically and all these other things. Like, again, you're not going to be Mike Trout, nor should you. You should be you, right? But when it comes to efficiency, and again, some of these skill sets that he has as a prerequisite, well, we can change those, and then train those. And then also, too, as well, when we get into the cage and everybody's like, oh, like, these guys are just making up drills. Every drill is made up.
Every single one of them.
Every single drill that is every drill is made up. I make up drills every single day. If it gets them to move and, again, gets the result that we're trying to do, then we're going to do it.
And then that's where I got, you know, the pushback and whatnot. It's like, where are you coming up with this stuff? And the answer is, I look at my players, I see how they need to move and what I think is going to get them there.
Yes.
And I don't really care what I put in their hand, how it is. It don't matter.
What implement, what if it makes them move.
Absolutely.
I could say, for example,
but that's funny. Every single drill is made up.
Every drill. Drill. So could you name me a drill that wasn't made up?
No.
No, thank you.
No.
Okay, let's say thing. Like the game of baseball was made up.
Yeah.
It's just like I just like, again, we get so past this ideology that we get lost, that we think that like we were supposed to stop innovating.
You're just supposed to stop creating.
Here.
All you're supposed to do is hit off a tee, Joey.
Yes, that's
it.
And or on the same thing, the side of that is just like we get to a place where, like, again, this hold on, we're supposed to use the same 6 drills. And if those 6 drills don't got it, either you got it or you don't. And
Oh,
we're
yeah.
we're just supposed to stop
At that
there.
point, they're done. Either
It's that. Yeah.
No, there's
Yeah.
and that dude, that could be a podcast for a whole nother day.
100%.
Golly.
100%. Right. So that just becomes, again, like when we do things, and again, I already know, look, at the end of the day, again, it's the same analogy. First one through the door, you're going to catch, you're going to get bloody.
Yeah.
It is what it is, right? The first guy through the door is going to get bloody. So I already know on the same side of that, right, that like the only way for people to push the industry forward, and I had somebody tell me this one time. They're like, Joey, like some people take, arrows for, their team and their places, but he was like, you take arrows for an industry. And I never thought of it like that. But one of the things I thought about as well, though, when he said that, I was very intentional about that knowing that the only way that anything moves forward and any innovator in any industry, and the only reason I have a cell phone right now is because somebody took the arrows to walk in front of me to do that, right? And I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the same it's my job to push that back forward, right? And I now have to be the guy that takes arrows, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's part of the process. And at the end of the day, like things don't move forward if someone's too afraid to take arrows or are not secure enough to know, like, at the end of the day, that like this is human psychology and this is what we do. We don't like change. We don't like adaptation. We like to think of people as superheroes. We want everything to be mythical. We want all these other places. And in reality with that, like it's science.
Yeah.
And we can figure those pieces out. Now, don't get me wrong, again, right? I always like to throw this back in there, right? Like, obviously on the same side of that is that science can only go so far, right? And science is wrong every day, right? We only know what we know. There's so many times, even with force plate data, right, that we learn something and it's like maybe how it was being measured, something we weren't keeping in mind. Like the foundation of what people like to say, because sometimes people will say like it's science, it's proven, it's factual, all these things, right? But the thing with science is it could always be disproved, right?
Mhm.
All it takes is one scenario,
One outlier, one
outlier.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, oh, maybe that's not how it was happening, right? So that's another thing as we think as well, is like science is constantly, every study you show me, I can show you 10 that say the opposite,
Mhm.
right? And so along with that, it's understanding. Now you gotta blend through. I had a pastor one time that I listened to, and he was saying this. He said, "There's more, there's more information out there than ever, right? But there's less truth."
Truth. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, for
and
sure.
so that becomes a big thing, is like, hey, you got to be able to filter these things as well and start to do your own deep dives. And I always tell people, like, don't trust me. Like, I mean, I've done the work,
Yeah.
but don't feel
Go
feel
do
like,
your
I'll
own
point
research.
you-
Yeah.
I'll point you in the directions. And also too, like, again, that's why we created Farm Plus. That's why we created all these, like our membership, right? It's like we have 500 plus videos on there. We have courses on there. We have biomechanics courses on there. We have all these things. Like, I already did a lot of the work. Not only did I go and instead of just pointing to the resource and going, hey, go read this and pull your own from this, I took that, made it applicable to baseball, right? Going, again, we found ways as a staff, right, to finally make these things applicable in the where you could use it with your hitters. Like, for example, even when you see in the double balls, right? Like, well, yeah, but that was so much work and mentally to figure out, wow, this is a way that we could use that. And then now it becomes a nasty nugget for you.
No
It
doubt.
might have took me years,
Yeah.
right, of figuring those things out and understanding why it works and understand the science and all those things. And it came out with one shiny little nugget that
There
can
it
help
is.
a lot of people. But that's
Yeah.
what it takes to push things forward.
Wow.
That's what it is.
Dude, this has been awesome. You continue to push. I'll continue to push
Absolutely.
with my stuff and the
Yeah.
way that I present it, and just know that this opportunity's been great, man.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome. Thank you guys so much for
Yeah, to get out and see it, watch it be applied.
Yeah.
You said something a little bit ago, and I'm not going to get down another rabbit hole, but
Yeah.
oh, he's out there teaching the scissor kick.
Yeah.
Oh, he's teaching the kickback.
Yeah.
Not one time did I hear the word scissor, kickback, any of that. Not one single time. It
sure.
was
How
core, rotation,
Yep.
torque, and it was a result.
Yeah.
And for that young man and for me, the result today, man, it really has. It's been awesome. So
Yeah.
you keep rocking on. We'll keep doing it. And maybe next time I come to Vegas, it won't be for 18 hours.
know.
Like I got to go and jump on a plane now.
For sure.
But
Absolutely. No,
so-
yeah. And feel free to join me. I have no thing. I always pray us out. So
hey, man, let's do it.
Cool. All right. dear Heavenly Father, thanks so much for bringing Josh here today, and also his brother. We just had such a good time together, and we'd love to bring your kingdom together. We just ask that we can continue to push the game forward in all the ways, and I think I pray that you protect both of them on their way home or to wherever they're going. And we ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right.
Amen.
All right. Well, until next time, Farm System out.